All right, hour number two here on a Monday. Chris Brown, Chris Trapasso with you, and pleased to be joined now by the lead draft analyst and co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast from Pro Football Focus. It is Trevor Sikkema, our good friend, joining us here. Trevor, thanks for the time here in the off season. I don't have to tell you that as web content goes, it's listicle season. Got to put those lists together. Got to get those off-season grades in, and you've been doing that in earnest at pff.com. Um, One of the things you put together, evaluating the Bills offseason so far, Bills get a C plus from you. You didn't want to be harsh on them, understanding their cap constraints. Limited though. So when you're limited in terms of your financial maneuverability, that's going to probably limit your grade as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and look, I think that certainly if you wanted to argue that it could be in the B range, certainly because of like you said, their hands were a little bit tied in what they were doing. I can understand that. It's hard to look at this team and this roster. No Stephon Diggs, no Jordan Poyer, no Micah Hyde, no Tre'Davious White. Von Miller not being what he was in years past. Like and a draft that trading back a couple of times. They end up getting Keon Coleman, who I think could be a really great player for them. But I think that that's a roll of the dice, as any draft pick is. But I just look at the Bills offseason, and it's certainly hard to, over the last 4 years that they've been division winners, to say, yes, like this team absolutely got better. I think it was sort of the time in their winning window where you get to the end of some of those contracts, some of those veterans get a little bit older, some situations falter a little bit, and you just got to move on in a handful of ways. So I think it was a sort of a tough pill to swallow for them this offseason, watching a lot of those veterans and watching a lot of those core names that they've had in the winning window no longer be on the team. But this is still a strong roster. So just because they didn't get a glowing offseason grade does not mean that they can't compete for double-digit wins and another division title. It just felt like between what they did versus what other teams did, they were one of the lower stacked up teams when it came to talent acquired and situation improvement going into 2024.
Trevor, segueing to another one of your articles recently, I thought it was a really cool idea to give your selections for the top 3 players on every team. So I would highly recommend going to read that article for all 32 teams that Trevor put out recently. You picked Josh Allen, unsurprisingly, Matt Milano, and Greg Rousseau for the Bills. What I'm wondering is, spinning forward to January, February 2025, beyond Josh Allen, obviously, are there any other players that you could see when I look back the end of the season that could be in that top 3 in terms of just best players on the Bills roster?
Yeah, and I think that's certainly the exciting part. That's the other side of the coin of what I just said, kind of talking about their offseason, is it's a lot of notable names that are no longer there. It opens up a lot of impactful snaps and a lot of opportunities for a lot of these players. And so I think it's very easy with no Stephon Diggs, with no Gabe Davis, to kind of look at the receiving core. And I throw tight ends in there as well. I think the easy answer would be, okay, well, if Keon Coleman kind of evolves into this wide receiver one for them, then obviously he would be in that conversation. But I'm going to shout out Dalton Kincaid, somebody that I really liked when he was coming out a couple of years ago. And he's somebody who I understand that it's sort of a crowded receiver room or tight end room with him and Dawson Knox. But man, I feel like the sky's the limit with the versatility of what you can do with Dalton Kincaid. And I feel like he could be such an X factor for this team. So I think he's a name that I would throw into that mix as one that I really feel confident could be in that conversation for one of their top 3 players, or at least a major X factor for this team. And then I'm going to shout out Christian Benford in the secondary, right? I mean, like, I
Good
think
one.
that this is a player who really took a leap, certainly in terms of PFF grade and really just overall performance from 2022 to 2023 as a full-time boundary corner for them. And I just, again, I look at a lot of the names in that secondary. Yeah, you still got Rasul Douglas, you still got Teron Johnson, Taylor Rapp now in one of those safety spots. So you're probably throwing Cole Bishop in there as well. But man, you got an opportunity with no Hyde, with no Poyer, no Tre'Davious White. Like this could be Christian Benford's time. I don't want to like put too much on his plate or too high of expectations, but like he could emerge as the best secondary player for this team, especially if he continues to build off of what we saw in 2023. So I think the 2 names that I would bring to the table that have a real chance to be in this top 3 a year from now is Benford and Kincaid.
As far as this year, though, and the three you came up with, how close did Taron Johnson get to cracking that top three? I mean, second team All Pro last year behind Trent
Yeah.
McDuffie. Actually, two slot corners are the All Pros at corner. McDuffie in Kansas City, and then Johnson here. How close did he come to making your top three list?
Yeah, I mean, like he was right there. I think with Rousseau of guys that would have been that the names that are just off of that list. And again, those players that kind of if you bring up, it's like, all right, yeah, I don't have too much of a debate against you. I went with Rousseau just because again, it was a really successful year for him. I know the sack number was low, but the overall production, I think the one-on-one wins from him were definitely up. I think that he's just getting better and better, and he's somebody who, when he was coming out of Miami, just as a draft analyst, taking you back a little bit, we knew that it was going to take a little bit of time. He's just a very raw defensive lineman where, I mean, Miami is playing him all over the field. And I know he's done that a little bit in the NFL as well, but I mean, he was like a stand-up edge rusher. He was a hand in the dirt. He was a 3-tech. He was a nose tackle. And so you knew that it was going to take time for a guy that had that kind of ceiling of being able to play all those positions to really hone in on ones that made the most sense for him in the league. And I think that he took a really nice step in that direction last year, was really an impactful presence for them along the defensive line. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, Johnson, you said the accolades and the recognition for him last year, he's in that conversation there too.
All right, spinning it forward to the 2024 draft class for the Bills. This is two draft analysts talking here, so I got to ask you a draft question. Not that you need to recite and remember all 10 of the Bills draft picks, but was there a specific player from this Bills draft in terms of maybe just a player that you love that they picked later, or best value or instant impact? Just give us kind of the classification that you had for what you estimated to be the Bills' best pick in the 2024 draft.
Yeah, I thought the Bills had a really good draft, and I'm going to cheat here, and I'm going to give you 3 that I really liked,
Okay.
and they're all on day 3. So they do kind of have the stipulation that you were talking about, some of those later picks. Ray Davis is a stud. I mean, he's awesome. Journeyman throughout college football. I think that he is somebody who really is going to have a chance to make his mark on this roster, even as just a rookie. I think that his play style, it's one that's easy to believe in. The output that we've seen over the last couple of years, 3 programs, he's been successful at the college level, including a really great year, basically the best year yet from him in Kentucky. So I think he's going to have a chance to really crack a rotational role and a contributing role this upcoming year. I like Sedrick Van Pran-Granger as well. I think that when you look at his experience and what he did in college football, 3 years of starting, national championship offensive lines. I mean, he was the guy who was, making the calls, communicating. He was a leader on that team. I mean, you cannot replicate that trust and experience for a program like Georgia. And Georgia, you got to remember, this is a team that's competing at the highest level of college football, multinational championships. They're going through a 3-peat this year, and they chose this guy to be the centerpiece of their offense for those entire runs. And I think that cannot be overstated enough, that experience that he has there. So Sedrick Van Pran, I think, has an opportunity to be a really good long-term starter for this team, even if maybe it is not right away. And then the last guy I'm going to shout out, a player who I thought should have gone a lot higher than pick number 168, is Javon Solomon, the edge rusher from Troy. He was a former off-ball linebacker at Troy, played well, good athlete. And then they moved him to edge this past year. And what did he do? Well, he just led the country in sacks. That's all. He's just very uniquely built. He's only about 6 foot tall, 6'1", but he's got long arms. I mean, he's got long arms like a 6'7" kind of a dude. And that wingspan is huge. And, that lack of length, it's not going to show up nearly as much for him despite the smaller height. And in fact, to me, he feels a little bit of the best of both worlds, right? He can get the pad level low because of the height, but yet he's not going to get totally outreached by those offensive tackles at the NFL level. So instead, you see a lot of that natural athleticism, that natural explosiveness from him. I thought that was a really great pick from them in the 5th round there with Javon Solomon.
Yeah, and I mean, the pads aren't on yet here in OTAs and upcoming minicamp this week, but he has flashed here as a rookie this spring. So it'll be encouraging to see what happens when the pads go on come training camp. I got to say, like, the Ray Davis pick was one that I really liked too. And right now, I mean, it's a running back room where at worst he's 3 behind, Ty Johnson and James Cook, obviously. And we saw this team after Joe Brady took over. I mean, they became one of the highest percentage run teams on first down the stretch there at the end of the season when they were in must-win situations at 6-6 after 12 games played, and they go 5-1 down the stretch. there's this general consensus, although none of us really know the answer, that Joe Brady is going to make a more concerted effort to turn to the run game, maybe take a little bit more of the load off Josh Allen. To me, that speaks to an even bigger opportunity for Ray Davis on a team with a coaching staff that doesn't like to play rookies a ton. I think he might be one of the exceptions, not only because of that, but he's already 25 years old, Trevor.
Right, right. And I think that, it feels like it's often taboo in NFL draft talks of like, ooh, he's older than 23. We can't, I mean, he might as well not be in the league, like we
Oh
can't
yeah.
draft this guy. And I think that, of course, there's two sides of the coin when you talk about older prospects, right? And I think that for Ray Davis, you mentioned it. I think to him, that experience ends up being a strength. Yes, he's got a little bit more miles on him, but you get him in a situation, especially like this one in Buffalo, where, yeah, I mean, James Cook is obviously kind of coming into his own. They're going to want him to be the RB1. He's got that explosiveness. He's got that pass catching ability. But, Ty Johnson, okay, spent a couple of years in the league, but it's not like he's been a heavy rotational guy even throughout his time in the NFL. He's kind of been sparely used. So I think that even Ty Johnson's spot, it could be a battle right there for who is going to be RB2 on this team. And you mentioned at worst, it feels like Davis is RB3, but I think certainly the opportunity is there for him to be that RB2. And I think you also get to, take a little bit of solace in the fact that Davis has now done this at multiple programs, right? It's not like, okay, well, I was recruited for a certain coaching staff and a certain program, and that's what I have been doing my entire college football career. This guy has been bouncing around the college football landscape with different programs and different coaching staffs, and that to me is only a emphasis of the strength of him to hit the ground running in this situation, because it's not like he's like, all right, well, I'm learning a playbook for the first time since I was in high school. No, I mean, he's learning a playbook, learning a new coaching staff. I mean, that's just what he does at this point. So I don't expect Davis to be overwhelmed by the learning curve, especially the early learning curve of taking that jump to the NFL. So I really do. I believe you. I think that, he's got that RB2 job in his sights, and I don't think that he is letting that rookie label get in the way of him trying to contribute for this team as much as he possibly can.
All right, Trevor, last one for me. Instead of asking you about another one of your articles, it just dawned on me. I remembered that you are a University of Florida alumni. You're always rooting for your Gators during college football season on Saturdays. And in me filling in on this show the last couple of weeks and months, I think the most intriguing player in terms of callers and tweets that we've gotten is Justin Shorter. Now, I give my own draft opinion of him. Now, you can give your own draft opinion and the fact that he played his final season of football at your alma mater. Tell the listeners just about the game and what you can expect in year 2 from Bills wide receiver Justin Shorter.
I mean, you love the size, right? I mean, that's what I was excited about him. And he was a 4-star, 5-star prospect for a reason. It was just that overall size and athleticism combination when he was at Penn State first and then he transferred over to the University of Florida. It didn't come along as much as I think people wanted it to for him throughout his college career. But again, it kind of goes back to Ray Davis a little bit. And okay, are these guys going to be overwhelmed when they get to the pro level? He's got pro size and speed. It's just a matter of, can he become that consistent route runner? Can he become that consistent separator? Are the drops going to remain low for him? Like, overall consistency of the game is going to be really important for him. But obviously it's a situation where, hey, if he starts having a really good camp, really good training camp, really good preseasons, he's going to make his case to be somebody that you can't forget about on this roster. So yeah, okay, if you're looking at the 5-star recruiting label, no, he didn't exactly live up to that at Penn State or at Florida, but there were certainly flashes of times when he showcased that 6'4", 225-pound frame that is upper 70th percentile for NFL wide receivers. And so those are the kind of guys that you take a chance on.
Last one for me, Trevor. I know you put out your division winners recently in terms of projections. You got the Dolphins winning the AFC East, which I don't think is an outlandish pick. We know the Bills have had a stranglehold on the division the last 4 years. A lot has changed in Buffalo. I think in fairness, though, and I'll just be a little bit of a devil's advocate here, there's been a fair amount of change in Miami, too. They're going to have another new defense for the 3rd straight season under Anthony Weaver. No Christian Wilkins, no Jerome Baker at the front 7. Xavier Howard, no. So, and it doesn't look like Bradley Chubb or Jalen Phillips are going to be ready to return at the start of the season, which would include the week 2 matchup with the Bills on Thursday Night Football. I know they got Shaq Barrett, which was a nice pickup in free agency, and they drafted Chop Robinson. But how do you see that potentially impacting their fortunes? Because that defense has got to come correct, like pretty much from the jump here to help them out.
Yeah, no, it's not like I picked Miami and thought, oh yeah, this one's not even close. Obviously, I think you could throw the New York Jets in there as well.
Yeah.
You can make a case for any of those three teams, and I think in years prior, I pretty easily picked the Bills. I think over the last 2 to 3 years, it was very easily the Bills. Now, I think just because of the roster makeup, no Stephon Diggs, none of the veterans that I was mentioning before, you're wondering who's going to step up and how much they're going to be able to step up. I think that simply opens the door. And when I look at Miami, the success that they had last year on offense, I think obviously, all those pieces are still there for them to continue to have that success on the offensive side of the ball. But on defense, I don't think people realize how good this defense was when it was fully healthy. Now, to your point, obviously, they're dealing with some injuries. They're dealing with some losses in free agency. But if they can kind of survive that, if the offense can just win them a handful of games throughout, I would say the first half of the season, then you'll get Phillips back, then you'll get Chubb back. And even if it's a little bit of an acclimation period between those guys, you added some good depth along the defensive line to be able to mitigate that. I really like their corners, even without Xavier Howard. You're adding Kendall Fuller as well. You still have Jalen Ramsey. Kader Kohu is great in the slot. You've got yourself Javon Holland as well. And so there's a lot of really good football players on that team. And I just kind of felt as I was looking at things, and the strength of schedule, I think, goes into it a little bit too, with the Bills having a tough strength of schedule. I just feel as though, okay, it kind of feels as though it could be Miami's time. It could be Miami's year here. But like I said at the beginning, them, the Jets, the Bills, it's sort of a three-way coin flip for all three of those teams. It's just going to be a heated race down to the very end, as people are pretty familiar with.
Yeah, I think we are anticipating a tighter race this year for the many of the reasons you just laid out. And to your point, the Dolphins, I believe, have the easiest schedule of those three teams in the division. Trevor, thanks as always for the time. We appreciate it. Enjoy whatever off season you have at your disposal when you're not busy clickety-clacking that keyboard for PFF.com. Thanks much.
Appreciate it, guys. Anytime.